Maria stood on the long, empty desert road, watching the hot air rise from the ground like waves. Her clothes were dusty. Her hair was messy from the wind, and her eyes looked tired from days of travel. The old bus she had been riding in lay a few steps behind her, completely broken down. Steam rose from its engine, and the driver had already given up, telling everyone that the bus wouldn't move for hours, maybe even the whole day. The few passengers who were left walked away toward the nearest town, which was many miles away. But Maria stayed. She had nowhere else to go, and no clear idea of what to do next. She wiped sweat from her forehead and looked around. The road stretched into the horizon like a long ribbon. On both sides, dry desert land spread far and wide. A few bushes stood like lonely guards, but nothing more. Not a single building, not a single sign of life. Just heat, dust, and silence. Maria sat on a small piece of shade cast by the broken bus. She hugged her small backpack against her chest. It was the only thing she owned. Inside it were 2 shirts, 1 pair of worn jeans, and a water bottle that was almost empty. She had saved the last sip of water, thinking she might need it later. She kept telling herself she would be fine. But deep down she was scared. She had left her old town in a hurry, hoping to start fresh somewhere new, but now she was stuck in the middle of nowhere. As the sun moved lower toward the evening sky, the heat finally began to soften. She stood up and stretched her sore legs. That was when she heard it, a soft sound of hooves hitting the ground at a steady rhythm. At first, she thought she was imagining it because of the heat and her tired mind, but the sound grew louder. She walked toward the road, shading her eyes with her hand. A cowboy rode a horse slowly toward her, followed by a small, old pickup truck rolling behind him. Dust rose from the ground with every step the horse took. The cowboy wore a wide hat that protected him from the sun, and his clothes were simple but neat. He looked like someone who lived far away from the noise of cities. Maria felt her heart beat faster. She didn't know if she should call for help, stay quiet, or walk away. She wasn't used to strangers offering kindness. Most people she had met had made her feel small, invisible, or like a burden. The cowboy stopped a few steps away from her. He pulled down the bandana around his neck, revealing a calm face with soft brown eyes. He didn't look dangerous or unfriendly. Instead, he looked concerned as he studied the broken bus behind her. "You stranded out here?" he asked in a steady voice. Maria swallowed. Her throat felt stiff. "Yes," she whispered. "The bus broke down." He nodded slowly and looked at the engine, which clearly wasn't going to start anytime soon. "This place isn't safe to stay after sunset," he said. "Temperatures drop fast. Coyotes come out. You need a ride." Maria lowered her eyes. She didn't want to bother him. She didn't want to seem desperate, even though she felt that way. For a moment, she thought maybe she should just start walking toward the distant town like the others. But her legs were weak, and the road was too long. She doubted she would make it before nightfall. "I don't have money," she said softly. "I can't pay for anything." The cowboy shook his head gently. "I didn't ask for money." Her voice trembled as she replied, "I'm not worth much, but I'll do anything for shelter." She said those words quietly, but he heard them clearly, and they surprised him. He blinked, looking at her differently now, not with confusion, but with sadness. He sensed the pain behind her words, the exhaustion, the feeling of being unwanted. He had heard many people speak in many ways, but the way she said those words told him a lot. She wasn't trying to offer anything wrong. She simply believed she had nothing valuable except the little help she could give. "Listen," he said gently. "You don't need to do anything. If you need a safe place for the night, I can take you to my ranch. I've got a spare room and food. That's enough." Maria felt a strange mix of relief and worry. She had met people before who pretended to be kind but later expected something unfair in return. She didn't want to fall into another trap, but his eyes didn't look like the eyes of someone who would hurt her. They looked honest, steady, and patient. "Why would you help me?" she asked slowly. The cowboy shrugged lightly. "Because you look like you need help, and around these parts, people look out for each other." Maria looked at the horse, standing calmly beside him. Then she looked at the small truck behind him. It wasn't shiny or new. It looked old and well used, like its owner didn't care about fancy things. That made her trust him more. Someone who lived simply usually had simple intentions. "My name's Ethan," he added, giving her a small nod. Maria hesitated before answering. "I'm Maria." Ethan nodded again. "Nice to meet you, Maria. If you want, I can give you a ride. You'll be safe at my place until morning. You don't have to stay longer than you want." She held her backpack tighter, thinking. The sky was turning orange, and soon darkness would spread across the desert. Her choices were limited: stay here alone, or accept the offer of the only person who seemed honest. She took a deep breath and finally said, "Okay." Ethan walked to the truck, opened the passenger door, and dusted off the seat with his hand. "You can sit here," he said. Maria climbed in slowly, grateful for the chance to rest her legs. The seat smelled like old leather and sunlight. And although the truck was old, it felt safe. Ethan tied his horse to a small trailer hitched behind the truck. He made sure the horse had water before closing the container. His movements were careful, gentle, and unhurried. Maria watched quietly, noticing how he worked with respect for even the smallest details. When he climbed into the driver's seat, he started the truck with a rough engine sound, and they began moving along the dusty road. Maria sat straight, her hands folded in her lap. She felt nervous, but also hopeful, two feelings she hadn't felt together in a long time. Ethan didn't force a conversation. He just drove, while the sky changed colors outside the window. After several minutes, Ethan finally spoke. "Where were you heading?" Maria pressed her lips together, thinking about how to explain her situation. "I was looking for work," she said honestly. "I needed a new start." Ethan nodded without judgment. "A lot of people come to this area for that." Maria sighed softly. "I just want a place where I won't bother anyone. A place where I can be useful." You'll find it," Ethan replied calmly. "Sometimes the road is rough, before it leads to something better." The simple words touched her. No one had ever spoken to her like that, with quiet faith, without asking anything in return. As they drove deeper into the desert, the evening breeze grew cooler. Stars slowly appeared in the sky, shining brightly in the darkening blue. Maria watched them from the window, feeling a strange sense of peace. Maybe she didn't know Ethan well, but something about him made her feel safe, like she could rest without fear for the first time in months. After a long drive, she saw a wooden fence and a small ranch house in the distance. Warm lights glowed from the windows. Horses grazed nearby, and the place looked calm, quiet, and welcoming. It felt like a different world from the harsh desert behind them. Ethan parked the truck and stepped out, helping her down carefully. She stood on the soft ground, breathing in the fresh smell of hay and cool night air. For the first time in a long while, she felt she might finally be somewhere she could rest her tired heart. Without knowing it, the simple choice she made on the desert road was the beginning of a new chapter, one where she would learn that she was worth far more than she had ever believed. When Maria stepped into Ethan's ranch house, she felt a strange mixture of fear and comfort. The house was small but warm, with wooden floors and walls that smelled faintly of pine. A soft yellow light filled the living room, and the quiet hum of the evening wind floated through the half-open window. It was nothing fancy, nothing luxurious, but it felt real, like a place where life was simple and honest. Ethan set his hat on a hook near the door and dusted off his boots. "You must be tired," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Take a seat. I'll get you some water." Maria nodded and sat carefully on the edge of a wooden chair, unsure of whether she should relax or stay alert. She had stayed in many places during her difficult years, some safe, some not, but this house felt different. It carried a quiet peace, the kind that forms when someone lives close to nature and far from trouble. Ethan returned with a clean glass of cool water. Maria held it with both hands and took small sips, feeling her dry throat slowly relax. She whispered a soft, "Thank you," And he simply nodded. "You can rest in the spare room down the hall when you're ready," he said. "It's not much, but it's clean, and the bed is comfortable." Maria looked around the living room. A few framed photos of horses hung on the wall. A bookshelf stood in one corner, filled with old Western stories, ranch guides, and maps. Everything seemed well kept, but humble. Clearly, Ethan lived a simple life, more focused on land and animals than on people or noise. He walked toward the kitchen. "I'm going to warm some food." "You haven't eaten, have you?" Maria hesitated before admitting. "Not since morning." "Well then," he replied, "you're going to eat now." Maria felt a little flutter in her chest at the kindness. She watched him as he moved around the kitchen. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't irritated. He just worked with quiet patience, heating soup and cutting slices of bread. She couldn't remember the last time someone prepared food for her without expecting anything in return. After a few minutes, Ethan placed a bowl of vegetable soup in front of her. Steam rose from it, carrying a warm smell that made her stomach tighten with hunger. Maria ate slowly at first, her hands slightly shaky. But soon her body relaxed enough to enjoy every spoonful. The soup wasn't fancy, it was simple and homemade, but to her, it tasted like comfort. Ethan sat across the room, giving her space. He didn't watch her with curiosity or suspicion. He simply allowed her to eat in peace. When she finished, he took the bowl and washed it without a word. Maria took a deep breath, feeling her worries soften. But then, as the quiet settled in, her memories returned. Her past was filled with people who had judged her, used her, or blamed her for things she never caused. She had been alone for so long that she didn't know how to handle genuine kindness. "Ethan," she said softly, "you don't even know me. Why are you helping me so much?" He dried his hands on a kitchen towel and leaned against the counter. "Because you needed help," he answered simply. "We all need help sometimes. And if I were stuck out there, I'd want someone to stop for me too." His words were plain, but they touched something deep inside her. She lowered her eyes and gripped her backpack straps. "I don't want to be a burden," she murmured. "You're not," he said firmly. "I wouldn't have brought you here if I felt that way." There was sincerity in his tone that she couldn't ignore. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe enough to breathe fully. After a few moments, Ethan cleared his throat. "Let me show you the room." He led her down the hallway to a small bedroom. The bed was neatly made with a faded quilt. A small lamp stood on a wooden table, and a window looked out toward the grazing fields. "You can stay here tonight," Ethan said. "No one else lives here, so you'll have privacy." Maria stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by the simple kindness. "Thank you," she whispered again, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan nodded once more. "Try to rest. You've had a long day. If you need anything, I'll be in the living room." Maria stepped inside the room. She placed her backpack on the floor, gently touched the blanket, and sat on the bed. The mattress felt soft beneath her weight, and the lamp cast a warm glow across the small space. She exhaled deeply, for the first time feeling the tension in her shoulders slowly fade. When she heard Ethan walk away, she allowed herself to lean back and close her eyes. But sleep didn't come immediately. Her mind wandered through old memories, streets where she worked small, odd jobs, nights when she slept in unsafe places, people who made her feel unwanted. She remembered the countless times she told herself she wasn't worth much. And now, sitting in a room someone had given her freely, she didn't know how to feel. After some time, Maria stood and walked quietly toward the window. The moonlight was spreading across the fields. The sound of crickets filled the air, and a gentle breeze moved through the grass. It was peaceful, something she had rarely experienced. A soft knock on the door made her turn. "You doing okay?" Ethan asked from outside. "Yes," she said quickly. "I'm fine. Just checking," he said. "Good night." "Maria, good night." When she lay down again, her body finally relaxed enough to drift into sleep. She woke before sunrise, the faint light turning the sky pale blue. She sat up, rubbed her eyes, and looked around the small room. It still felt safe. She still felt safe. and that was new for her. A faint smell of brewed tea came from the kitchen. She walked out carefully, not wanting to intrude, and found Ethan preparing breakfast. The kitchen window was open, letting in fresh morning air. "You're awake early," he said with a small smile. "I'm used to waking up at sunrise," she replied. "Well, that's good. Life on a ranch starts early." Maria felt a tiny spark of curiosity. "You live alone?" she asked. "Yeah," Ethan said, cracking eggs into a pan. "My parents passed a few years ago. I've been taking care of this place on my own." The news made Maria feel a soft ache for him. But he didn't speak with sadness, just quiet acceptance. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "Life happens," he replied. "But the ranch keeps me busy. And I like the quiet." Maria watched him work. His movements were steady, practiced. He did everything with intention, nothing rushed, nothing careless. She admired that. It reminded her of the opposite life she had lived, where things were always unstable and uncertain. When breakfast was ready, Ethan placed a plate in front of her again. "Eat as much as you want. You'll need your strength." Maria nodded and began eating. She finished the food quickly, surprised at her own appetite. Ethan seemed pleased. "You can help out around the ranch today if you want," he said calmly. "Not because you owe me anything, but because it might give you something to do." Maria felt a wave of relief. She wanted to be useful. She wanted to feel like her presence mattered. "I'd like that," she replied. He smiled lightly. "Good. We'll start with feeding the animals." Throughout the morning, Maria followed Ethan around the ranch. She helped feed the horses, carried buckets of water, and swept the barn. The work wasn't easy, but it felt honest. For once in her life, she didn't feel judged or pressured. Ethan showed her how to do things and didn't get frustrated when she made mistakes. At one point, she tripped slightly while lifting a heavy bucket. Ethan reached out quickly to steady it. "Careful," he said, his voice filled with concern rather than annoyance. Maria looked down, embarrassed. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," he replied. "You're learning. That's enough." Those simple words warmed her heart. No one had ever spoken to her like that. By midday, Maria felt tired, but strangely happy. She stood outside near the fence, watching the horses graze under the sunlight. The peaceful scene made her feel calm inside. Ethan walked up beside her. "You did good today," he said. "You catch on fast." Maria looked at him with a small, shy smile. "Thank you for trusting me." Ethan shrugged softly. "Trust is earned, Maria. And you're earning it." She looked back toward the fields, feeling a sense of belonging she had never felt before. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for now, she knew she was safe. She knew she was valued not for what she could offer, but simply because she was human, and that simple truth began to change something inside her. For the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as worthless as she had always believed. Maria's days on the ranch slowly turned into a gentle routine filled with fresh air, simple work, and quiet moments that felt healing in ways she had never known before. Each morning, she woke before sunrise, hearing the soft sounds of horses moving in the barn, and the distant call of birds welcoming a new day. It was peaceful, far more peaceful than any place she had lived in before. The first few weeks were a time of learning. At first, she was unsure about everything: how to lift hay without tiring her arms too fast, how to carry water buckets without spilling, and how to brush a horse without startling it. But Ethan was patient with her. He watched her closely but never in a judging way. Whenever she made a mistake, he corrected her gently. Whenever she succeeded, even in something small, he acknowledged it with a simple nod or a warm smile. Maria began to enjoy tasks she had once feared. Feeding the horses in the morning, for example, became one of her favorite moments. She liked the way the horses trusted her slowly, approaching her with calm eyes and soft breaths. She liked brushing their coats and feeling their warm bodies relax under her hands. For someone who had spent so much of her life moving from place to place, feeling unwelcome almost everywhere. The quiet trust of animals was something she treasured deeply. One afternoon, Ethan handed her a small notebook. "This is for you," he said. "It's a basic guide to ranch work. I wrote down steps for things you can practice on your own." Maria opened it slowly. His handwriting was neat and steady. Each page carried simple instructions, little drawings, and reminders like, "Don't rush," or "Take your time." The animals can sense your mood. She felt her throat tighten. "You made this for me?" Ethan shrugged like it was nothing, even though it was clearly something meaningful. "It's easier to learn when you have something to look at. You're doing good, Maria. Just keep going." She ran her hand over the notebook cover as if it was something precious. For years, people had treated her like she wasn't worth teaching or guiding, like she had nothing important inside her, but this small gesture felt like proof that someone believed in her. It brought a warmth to her chest that she hadn't felt in years. As days passed, Maria found herself growing stronger physically and emotionally. She could lift heavier loads, walk longer distances across the ranch, and even handle the more stubborn animals with calm patience. Ethan noticed her progress and started teaching her more advanced tasks. He showed her how to fix fences, how to check a horse's hooves, and how to prepare feed properly. Sometimes, when the sun was high and work was tiring, Maria doubted herself. She feared that she might fail or disappoint Ethan. But every time she hesitated, Ethan encouraged her with steady words. "You're capable, Maria. Don't be afraid of trying. Mistakes are part of learning." Little by little, her fears began to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence. There were evenings when they sat outside on the porch, watching the sky turn from blue to purple as the sun went down behind the hills. Those moments were quiet but meaningful. Maria liked listening to the crickets and feeling the cool breeze against her face. Ethan often sat beside her, sometimes talking about his childhood on the ranch, sometimes sharing stories about his parents, who had taught him everything he knew. "They worked hard," Ethan said one evening, "but they were kind. They believed in helping anyone who needed a hand. I guess I learned that from them." Maria nodded, understanding him more deeply now. "They must have been good people." "They were," Ethan replied softly, "and when they were gone, the ranch felt empty for a long time." Maria looked at him carefully. She had always thought of Ethan as strong and steady, but now she could see the quiet loneliness that lived inside him too. "You've done well," she said thoughtfully. "This place feels peaceful because of you." Ethan smiled at her words, as if they meant more than she knew. "Peace is easier to find when good people are around," he said gently. Glancing at her, Maria felt her cheeks warm. She didn't know how to respond, so she just looked at the horizon, letting his words settle inside her heart like a soft blanket. Life at the ranch wasn't easy, but it was real. And because it was real, Maria began to change from the inside out. She didn't think of herself as not worth much anymore. She didn't feel like a burden. She didn't feel lost. Instead, she felt like a person with purpose, someone who could contribute, learn, and grow. There were moments that tested her, of course. One morning, a young horse got frightened by a sudden noise and broke into a fast run inside the fenced area. Maria panicked for a moment, afraid she might get hurt, but Ethan moved quickly, calming the horse with steady words and slow steps. After he secured the horse, he turned to Maria. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded shakily. "I was scared." "That's normal," Ethan said. "Fear doesn't mean you're weak. It just means you care about staying safe. You handled it better than you think." His reassurance helped her regain her breath. She realized that she no longer had to pretend to be strong. She could just be herself. One evening, after a long day of work, Maria stood in the barn, brushing one of the horses. The soft light from the lantern created gentle shadows on the floor. She hummed quietly, feeling strangely happy. Ethan walked in, leaning lightly against the doorway, watching her for a moment before speaking. "You've changed," he said in a thoughtful voice. Maria paused and turned to him. "Changed?" "Yeah," he said. "When you first arrived, You were so unsure of yourself. You kept apologizing for everything. Now look at you. You're calm, steady, confident. A shy smile touched her lips. It's because you taught me. Ethan shook his head softly. I only guided you. You're the one who did the work. You just needed someone to believe in you. Tarrant. Adian. His words made her heart tighten in a warm way. She looked down, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. No one has ever believed in me before, she said quietly. Not truly. Then I'm glad I could be the first, he said. There was a silence between them, soft, comfortable, and meaningful. As the days went by, Maria found joy in simple things. The way the horses came running when they heard the sound of grain. The soft glow of lanterns at night. The warmth of the kitchen after a cold morning, and the quiet smile Ethan gave her whenever she did something right. These moments healed her slowly, gently, without pressure. Maria also began to talk more. She shared pieces of her past, not everything, but enough for Ethan to understand the hardships she had faced. She told him about the jobs she had worked, the places she had lived, and the people who had made her feel small. Ethan listened without interrupting, without judging, and without pity. He treated her stories with respect, as if they were important parts of who she was. One afternoon, while they were fixing a fence together, Maria said something that surprised even herself. I don't feel useless anymore, she said quietly. Ethan paused, resting his arm on the fence post. That's because you were never useless, he replied simply. You just needed space to grow. Maria looked away for a moment, her eyes warming with emotion. Thank you, she whispered. She realized then that Ethan's ranch had become more than a temporary shelter. It felt like the first place where she could breathe, learn, and exist without fear. It felt like home not because of the walls or the fields, but because of the kindness she found there. And that kindness began to shape her into someone stronger, someone hopeful, someone who could finally imagine a better future. She didn't know yet where her life would go, but she knew she wasn't alone anymore. She knew she had worth. She knew she mattered. And that was the beginning of her new life. One built, not on fear, but on trust, respect, and the steady kindness of a lone cowboy who believed in her, even when she couldn't believe in herself. The next few weeks slowly changed the direction of both their lives in a way neither had imagined. After the stormy night, when the truth came out, Sarah began to feel like she had finally stepped out of a long, dark tunnel. She still had worries about her future, her past, and whether she truly deserved a new beginning, but something inside her had softened. The ranch was giving her peace, and Ethan's kindness was giving her confidence. Every morning, she woke before sunrise and helped with chores, not because she felt forced to, but because she wanted to contribute. The ranch felt like a home she had never experienced before. Ethan noticed the change too. When she smiled, it didn't look forced anymore. When she worked, she didn't glance around nervously, expecting someone to shout at her. She moved with a steady calmness that made him realize how much she had been carrying before. He admired her determination, though he never said it out loud. He just continued treating her with the same quiet respect he always did, like someone who mattered, not someone who was lost. One morning, while they were feeding the cattle together, Sarah paused and looked at the open land stretching far into the horizon. She whispered that she had always dreamed of a place like this, a place where the sky looked big enough to carry her worries away. Ethan listened without interrupting. He knew that sometimes the smallest truths were the hardest to say. Before meeting her, silence had been easy for him. Now, he found himself listening more carefully than ever. As the days passed, Sarah began to explore the ranch with curiosity. She learned how to fix fences, how to calm the horses, and how to tell when the weather was about to change. Ethan taught her gently, always patient, always steady. Sometimes she would make mistakes and panic a little, afraid he might be upset. But he never was. He would simply guide her again, or show her another way. Slowly, she began to trust him not just because he helped her, but because he believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. Evenings became her favorite time. After dinner, she and Ethan would sit on the porch with mugs of warm tea, listening to the wind move through the grass. They rarely spoke much, but the silence between them was warm and comfortable. Sarah found herself opening up in small ways, telling stories from her childhood, talking about how she used to dream of becoming a nurse, or sharing memories of her mother. Ethan didn't ask questions that were too deep or too painful. He just let her talk when she felt ready. One evening, as fireflies flickered around the porch, Sarah surprised herself by saying she wanted to stay longer, maybe even learn more about ranch life. Ethan looked at her with a gentle surprise, then nodded. He told her she was welcome for as long as she wanted. His voice was simple, but Sarah felt the meaning behind his words. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she belonged somewhere. But life still had its challenges. Sarah's past didn't disappear just because she had found a safe place. There were nights when she woke from uneasy dreams, breathing fast, remembering the cold streets she had walked alone. Ethan never questioned her on those nights. If he heard her moving around, he simply asked if she was all right. If she said yes, he respected her space. If she said no, he made her a warm drink and sat with her until she felt calm again. One day, Sarah received a message from an old friend she hadn't spoken to in a long time. The friend had heard she was missing and had been worried. The message brought mixed feelings, sadness, guilt, and a small bit of relief. Sarah told Ethan about it during lunch. He listened quietly, then told her she could reply whenever she felt ready. He reminded her that she didn't owe anyone an explanation until she wanted to give one. She realized then how different he was from people she had known before. He never pushed her, never made her feel trapped. He gave her the space to grow at her own pace. As the seasons slowly shifted, Sarah learned more than just ranch work. She learned patience, confidence, and how to take pride in small accomplishments. She fixed a broken gate on her own one afternoon and waited excitedly for Ethan to see it. When he did, he smiled, not a polite smile, but a real one that reached his eyes. She realized then how important encouragement could be and how deeply it affected her. Their bond grew naturally, without pressure or expectations. Neither of them wanted to label it too soon. It wasn't just friendship, but it wasn't something rushed either. It was a connection built from shared days, quiet moments, and mutual respect. Sarah found herself looking forward to hearing Ethan's footsteps each morning, and Ethan found himself checking the porch in the evenings to see if she had settled into her favorite chair. One windy afternoon, while Ethan was repairing the barn roof, Sarah stood below watching anxiously. She called out for him to be careful, worried he might slip. He laughed and told her he had been doing this since before she was born. But her concern touched him. It made him realize how much he had gotten used to her presence on the ranch. She wasn't just someone he had helped. She had become part of his daily life, in a way he hadn't expected. Later that evening, as they were putting tools away, Ethan finally told her something he hadn't said before. He told her that the ranch used to feel too big and too empty after his parents passed away. For a long time, he had lived with only work and silence. But since she had arrived, the ranch felt alive again. Sarah didn't know how to respond at first. She felt warmth rise in her chest, and her eyes softened in a way Ethan noticed immediately. She hadn't realized until that moment how much she had changed his world just by being there. The next few weeks passed peacefully. Sarah continued working on the ranch, growing stronger and more confident. She no longer walked with her shoulders tight or her eyes lowered. She stood tall, spoke freely, and even laughed more often. Ethan noticed every change, though he didn't say much. He simply appreciated the way her presence brightened the quiet places of his life. One morning, she told Ethan that she wanted to start studying again, maybe take a course online or learn something new. Ethan encouraged her without hesitation. He even set up an old table near the window so she could have a quiet place to study. When she thanked him, he simply said that people deserved chances to grow, and she was no exception. Her eyes filled with emotion, but she held herself steady. As the year's first snowfall began to cover the land in soft white, Sarah stood outside watching flakes land on her hands. Ethan joined her silently. They watched the snow fall in smooth, gentle waves. Sarah whispered, that she had never felt more at peace. Ethan nodded slowly, feeling the same but unsure how to put it into words. Standing side by side, they both understood something important. Neither of them was alone anymore. They had found something steady, something warm, something real. She had come seeking shelter, thinking she had nothing to offer. But she brought light into Ethan's quiet world. And he had given her a chance to rebuild her life, with dignity and hope. Their story didn't end with a dramatic moment. It continued naturally, like the changing seasons around them. They grew together, supported each other, and built a future shaped by compassion and understanding. Sarah no longer felt worthless. Ethan no longer felt alone. And the ranch, once silent and still, became a place filled with new beginnings. In the quiet peace of that winter evening, Sarah looked at Ethan and knew one truth with complete clarity. She had found not just shelter, but a life that finally felt like it belonged to her. And Ethan, watching her smile softly under the falling snow, realized that opening his door to a stranger had given him more than he ever expected, someone who changed his world simply by being in it.